Good afternoon. Wow, they didn't tell me I was going to get fired. That's awesome. Well, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak to you today. I have a few things that I really want to cover. But first, just a little bit of history, really, about me and about what MasterCard are doing here. I've been fortunate enough to work in the space of digital identity for a few years now. I originally started my journey developing a strategy for customer data management at a bank. And I stumbled upon a book by Dave Birch called Identity is the New Money. And it hit me that actually the way to manage customer data would be to allow the consumer to manage their data and then provide that in a way that could be trusted by organizations. And that really started me on my journey for on digital identity. I was asked to join MasterCard early last year. And that really was because back in 2006, MasterCard created the Mastercard Foundation, which is a part of the organization that really focuses on inclusion. And we see that digital identity is a key factor in inclusion. Being able to access financial products and services as an individual really starts with identity, being able to prove that you are who you say you are and that you have a set of entitlements. That's really, really key. So we see that all digital interactions really start at their core with digital identity. I'm here today to talk to you about our thinking on digital identity. We described this recently, so in March this year, in a white paper called Restoring Trust in a Digital World. And if you haven't had an opportunity to read it already, I heartily recommend that you do. It's available at mastercard.com/digital identity. It's a shameless plug for some of our work, but it's a really good document, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the content of that information today. That paper started with a set of interviews in 5 cities around the world with 130 identity professionals, all with a view on identity, the requirements, why we don't have a digital identity ecosystem today, and listing all of the challenges and reasonings behind the need for digital identity. We consolidated that information along with our own thinkings and our own learnings, and then developed that into our white paper. MasterCard have been working for the last 50 years or so in creating operational frameworks that instill trust in the way that people interact online. People are comfortable with the way that the MasterCard payment network works. They know that they can trust it. And so we started thinking, well, could we apply some of the same thinking around the way that payment networks work to the way that identity should work? Fundamentally, what we need is a way to trust information. It's all well and good for me as a consumer to be able to say that I am who I say I am. Interestingly enough, I'm registered at this event as Charlie Walton, not as Dan Johnson. My boss, Charlie, was unable to make it today. And so I have to prove that I really am who I say I am in order to be here today. The trust is really, really key, and it's not about just being able to assert information. You really need to be able to prove that you are who you say you are. We have an existing paradigm for how to prove that you are who you say you are in a face-to-face or in a physical environment. So when I was very young and I needed to open my first bank account as a child, my dad took me to my bank. We sat down with the bank manager. My dad filled out a bunch of forms. He needed to prove his relationship with the bank, and thus I became known to the bank. Also, when I meet people for the first time, often it's done through somebody that we know or trust, which means that I can feel confident that the person that I'm being introduced to is genuinely who they say they are, and that person can also feel confident that they know who I am. Now that works really, really well in a face-to-face environment, but unfortunately it doesn't really translate particularly well into an online environment. In her book, Who Can You Trust?, Rachel Botsman described trust as a confident relationship with the unknown. So when we started thinking about what role MasterCard could play in creating an identity ecosystem, we knew fundamentally that we had to start with the user. Building the user into the model right at the very beginning is absolutely crucial. This can't be an afterthought. Everything has to center around the individual. In our white paper and our vision paper, we describe 10 principles for identity. There is a full description in the paper, and I recommend having a look through there. But again, fundamentally, all of those concepts really focus on the fact that the user is right in the center of all of their identity interactions and transactions. We're not in the business of building an enormous identity database in the cloud. We think that's entirely the wrong direction to be going in. We've seen through data breaches and other issues that having huge amounts of data, personally identifiable information in the cloud is not a great idea. Centering information around the individual and allowing that individual to exert control over the data that they have and the way that they interact with organizations, we see as fundamentally important. And in fact, when we were designing the system, we started looking at, well, how would we feel about using the system? So we designed a system that we feel comfortable using. And it's all well and good designing a system to enable a person to create or to establish their identity. But really, fundamentally, it comes down to use of that identity. And that's really a key part that MasterCard have to play in the creation of an identity ecosystem. We have relationships with 23,000 banks, with 50 million merchants. We operate in 200 countries around the world. And all of those merchants are providing products and services to individuals. All of our business has been around connecting users to merchants and in order to enable them to obtain the products and services that they desire. Now that could be opening a bank account or obtaining a card or some other service, some other financial service. It could be proving that I am who I say I am in order to participate in the sharing economy, either as offering services or consuming services. It could be as simple as proving that I am over the age of 18 or 21 in order to be able to buy wine, either online or in person. So fundamentally, the use cases, the utility of identity is fundamentally important. So we created a system model to reflect how an identity ecosystem should work. It starts with users and the users interacting with relying parties being the organizations consuming identity data and offering products and services. But that's not enough in a system. Fundamentally, we need to be able to trust that information, which is where identity verification providers come in. These are organizations that have golden source data that they're able to offer to help to verify that information about a user is true and is accurate. These will be government agencies, so registers, passport office, tax records, driver's license authorities. There'll be mobile network operators being able to prove that a person is in control of a device, for example. And many other organizations, universities to establish qualifications. And again, that's not enough. What we need is a way for an individual to interact with the rest of the world, with those relying parties, and that's where trust providers come in. Trust providers are organizations that have large consumer bases and also have considerable trust in the market to be able to develop that relationship with the consumer and to provide them with a set of tools that will help them to manage their identity in their relationship with relying parties. And even that's not enough. Fundamentally, there needs to be some glue that holds all of this together. A digital identity service that deals with orchestration of data flows, the security, the trust in the environment, dealing with liability apportionment, and other factors that will help to ensure that all of the parties are acting in the way that they're supposed to, all with the interest of users fundamentally at the front of their minds. So all of that comes together in what we have created as our system model for identity. And we see that MasterCard are qualified and also appropriate to be able to deliver that service and connecting all of these parties together, again, with the user in mind. But we can't do this on our own. Fundamentally, this is a collaborative effort. We need organizations like banks, like mobile network operators, tech providers, and other organizations, all to work together with a common goal of establishing an identity framework and an identity operational system that allows all of these parties to work together in cohesion. From a government perspective, not only do we see governments as being able to provide evidence of identity, but we also see them as ensuring that the user is protected in the environment and that local regulation is adjusted to allow for digital assertion of identity. Seem to have gone on one slide too many there. You'll notice that I haven't talked about our product or our service. I haven't talked about the partners that we are working with. I haven't talked about the markets that we're operating in. All of that is stuff that we are working on. We are actively engaged, and more announcements will be coming in the not too distant future. We believe fundamentally that we are well positioned as an organization to create an identity ecosystem. We have the resources, we have the DNA, and most importantly, we have the will to create such a system. We are striving to make a difference. We feel that the right way to do this is to lay out how we're thinking as we're thinking about it and not operate behind closed doors. This is fundamental to generating a system that people can trust in and believe in and will operate effectively. We're just getting started. We know that this is going to be a messy journey, a long journey, and it's going to be constantly challenging. One of the main reasons I'm here today is to ask for your help. If you are a tech company, a bank, a mobile network operator, I'd like you to think about how you could use identity in order to reduce friction in your consumer interactions. I'd like you to think about how you could provide data into the system to other relying parties in order to extract value from the data that you have and to provide better systems for individuals. If you are tech companies, I'd like you to think about what could you bring? How could you collaborate? How could you help us in order to deliver a fresh, relevant system in the market? And also, I'd like you to think about how to challenge us. Where have we gone wrong? What haven't we thought of yet? And if you can provide that feedback to us, that would be fantastically helpful in establishing an identity ecosystem. I'm afraid right now I don't especially have time for questions. I'm going to be around for the rest of the day. If you see me around, please stop me and talk to me about your ideas and also what do you think of our proposition and how that works. Thank you very much for listening.